just defining what fan engagement is a challenge in itself.
People seem to think that to have a good fan engagement experience for the fans is kind of set it up once and then hopefully you're going to have massive results. I think it's more like build it brick by brick.
Welcome to Future of Fandom, the podcast where leagues, teams, and federations learn how to turn passive viewers into loyal superfans through gamification, loyalty, and next-gen engagement. Let's build what's next together. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Future of Fandom. We're doing things a little bit differently for this episode, and we're turning the mics around on our usual hosts, Miheer and Sam, because we have some very exciting topics to dive into today, all around the subject that is at the forefront of everyone's mind, artificial intelligence. So, Miheer, Sam, welcome to your very own podcast, Future of Fandom.
Thank you for having us.
Miheer, let's start with you. You've spoken a lot about AI, both within LiveLike and externally, not just as a buzzword, but as a way to fundamentally rewire how fan engagement works. So from your perspective, what's broken, what's inefficient about the way leagues, teams, broadcasters are building fan experiences today?
And that's a loaded question to start off, but I think, look, in general, the way fan engagement has worked is it's been a catch-all. So pretty much anything that is fan-facing is clubbed as fan engagement at this point in time. So just defining what fan engagement is a challenge in itself. But in terms of what kind of experiences are being launched for the consumers, I think the biggest challenge is that have been siloed experiences. I mean, sports industry in general is a fragmented ecosystem, right? Whether that's rights and content being across multiple different platforms, leagues and teams wanting to do their own thing, multiple different providers in the space. So that lends itself to being a little bit more of a disjointed experience. One thing that LiveLike has been trying to do is cultivate a partnership model in the space so that multiple companies and providers in the space working together in the ultimate interest of serving a more holistic fan experience. And I think that's starting to happen. It's actually good to see that the industry is moving towards that now. So many of us have been doing this for a long time that I think the cream is rising to the top in a way. And we know who are the other partners in the ecosystem that we should be daisy chaining along with. But for the longest time, I would say that the fan experience has been data capture, unified view of fan was challenging. But you see more and more properties and leagues starting to take a more concerted view towards data. At this point, everyone's investing in their own data infrastructure, trying to create a more unified profile. And obviously that helps partners like companies like us as well.
So Sam, obviously you as the co-founder and chief revenue officer of LiveLike speak with a huge range of clients across sport, media, entertainment. What are you seeing as being the recurring friction points when it comes to launching and scaling digital engagement campaigns?
I think that if you want to create a fan engagement strategy, digital engagement, first of all, it has to sit on a certain type of tech stack if you want it to have something meaningful. Right. So I think that is the first element, is that people have to understand that to do something good and that it has value, you actually have to think it through and integrate it in the right way. Right. So the first element is to find the people on the other side who understand what needs to be done, that have a good sense on what is the digital impact that it will have on their platforms and how to bring it to life. So I think that is the first element. The second element is to avoid having completely disjointed experiences like it is the case currently in the sports industry. There has to be cross-department alignment. So that is one thing that we're facing, is that everybody goes about it in their own way. And the ones that are actually starting to succeed at creating good experiences are the ones who are working together versus in silos. So I think that is a fundamental element, because me as a fan, whether I'm at the shop, at the stadium, international, at venue, I am still the same fan, and there should be a coherent experience throughout my experiences in those different areas. So I think that is fundamental. And the last thing is, people seem to think that to have a good fan engagement experience or a good digital experience for the fans is kind of set it up once and then hopefully you're going to have massive results. I think it's more like build it, brick by brick, and actually have resources behind it and think about engagement at all the steps along the way. It's not just like, hey, I can have a quiz on my website. It's no, how do I use a tool like LiveLike at venue, at home, for international fans? It's different types of practices. It's different types of people who will touch the technology to be able to have a successful strategy. So this is where, in the same way that it is natural for everyone to think about editorial as a common effort, fan engagement should be thought through just like content as something that every time I put a piece of content out or think about my fans, think about fan engagement, how to make it fun.
Where are you seeing this change being driven from within leagues and teams and federations? Is this a top down kind of executive leadership saying, hey, look, it's time for us to deliver that unified experience? And in order for that, we need to look at our organizational design and start breaking down these walls? Is it more of a bottom up? Okay, we're seeing churn in the fan base at the front line. And so now we need to look at how we're going to go about solving that. Like, where are you seeing that internal change management being born from?
I think that our champs can be at any level of the organization, except if they're too low, right? There has to be some buy-in at top level that fan engagement is something that is important and that data is something that is important because you can have the infrastructure to be able to capture data, but you have to have the engine on the front end to be able to have reasons why people will give their data. And so to be able to do it efficiently with an impact on your strategy to actually turn it into revenue, um, there has to be some efforts, there has to be some belief behind the strategy, and so it can come in from different levels. It can be the CEO who understands it because they just fly on a weekly basis and understand that they're very loyal to a company. In which case they say, "Hey, why don't we have a loyalty program?" But it can just be something who's savvy on digital innovation and that start thinking, oh, but why is social media working well? It's because it's social. Why don't I bring over social to my platform? Right. So it's like it can be a mix, but you have to have champs that have a certain impact on the business because otherwise, if it's just somebody at a very low level, he'll never get the mandate to be able to build something meaningful.
Yeah, I can just add on to that a little bit. All these media companies, I mean, especially with the breakup of the bundle and most of these most of these sports properties having to try to figure out how to go direct to consumer, they've had to operate more like media and tech companies that almost naturally lent itself to an organizational change, right? Like there are more and more people in the data and analytics team. There are more people in the marketing team. You're not just selling the rights centrally and collecting a check. You have to actually invest in team and structures to maximize the revenues that you can control. And usually those revenues are on the ticketing side, on the merchandising side. And for that, you need to know who your fans are. You need to know a little bit more about how to cater to them. And so that's where the organizational design has changed, I would say. And frankly, that buy-in comes in from the top. It has to come from the boardroom. It has to come from the head of strategy, the head of revenue, the head of the CEO of an organization or the president of an organization. But I think that shift has been slower than most people would have expected, but it is finally happening. In the last few years, you can see across the board, more and more organizations starting to operate like media.
To shift gears a little bit, Miheer, and to bring this to AI and its impact on the kind of product strategies of the organizations that we work with here at LiveLike. Obviously, it's easy to get carried away in the hype of the opportunity that artificial intelligence that can provide to businesses, and often that's very different from the reality of what's actually achievable and it's actually going to move the needle. So where do you and where does LiveLike see the most immediate and practical opportunities for AI to come in and transform fan engagement, not just in the theory, but in day-to-day workflows?
LiveLike has always taken a measured approach towards new technologies, right? Whether it was AR, VR, whether it was Web3, whether it's AI. We've never been the first ones out the gate changing our URL to .web3 or .ai. That's not who we are as an organization. We consider ourselves as a technology company that's servicing our customers. And it's always been with the view of how can we help our customers do better and be more successful. And when we looked around, I mean, obviously the world, it's hard to not get swept up in the wave of AI. And I'm not just talking about as a business, but as a consumer. We are all exposed to AI every single day at this point in time, whether it's the content that we're seeing, consuming, or our own personal usage and consumption of AI tools for productivity purposes, etc. So when we looked out there in terms of like what is LiveLike's point of view on AI, we started with what were the problems we're trying to solve. And if you think about LiveLike, the core personas that LiveLike caters to, it's the developer who's using our LiveLike is a developer platform first and foremost. So people use our APIs and SDKs to build their own experiences. So we have to figure out how to make the life of that developer or solutions architect on our side easier. The second person that we cater to usually is a product manager or a marketer, people that are sort of catering to creating campaigns, driving engagement within their owned and operated experiences. The third person that we're catering to is the editorial person, who is actually in charge of coming up with the content, creating the trivia question, creating the poll, contextual, personalized. And then the fourth person is usually the business analyst who's measuring whether the campaigns are successful or not. Now, in most organizations that we work with, these are four different personas or four different stakeholders that have to usually work together in order to drive the ultimate goal of achieving success or ROI. So we started with that as the problem statement first. For each of those personas, how can LiveLike help? And that's what the LiveLike Genie is born out of. We have focused our efforts on workflow automation. We don't have to be a fully autonomous engine on day one. The goal here is how do we help our partners do their everyday jobs faster and more efficiently? Frankly, also help them innovate more, where you're not doing the same rote task over and over again. How do we get them to the rote task can be taken care of by AI and you focus on the actual creative stuff? And then the second level, second order of that is how to, coordination between those four disparate departments is usually where the challenges are, the biggest challenges are. And so if our AI tools can actually coordinate amongst those four departments, four personas on behalf of the client, that is the next big unlock, which wasn't even thought about before. And so now if our agents can tell you your last campaign could have done better in this way, can we provide you recommendations on how to do better next time? That recommendation is actually going to the content person or the marketing person. And then the next order of thing is more autonomous, like semi-autonomous. I don't think, again, we're not looking at a fully autonomous engine at this point, but it's more like you can come into the LiveLike system, you can schedule your campaigns, you can set it and forget it. You will have a report delivered to you every morning that tells you how yesterday's campaign did, what can be done better. And I think that's where the agentic workflow comes into play. And then the last phase of how LiveLike looks at AI is the MCP server has been a big boon. I mean, bringing it full circle to the developer platform. LiveLike has been a developer platform, which means that you sophisticated product and engineering teams at the client side or customer side to be able to leverage the LiveLike APIs and SDKs to its fullest capabilities. Well, now agents can do that. Vibe coding platforms can do that. So LiveLike launching its own MCP server means that more people can actually leverage, or more organizations can leverage LiveLike's developer tools, because you're not restricted by capacity and sophistication on the client side. You're restricted by information. And so there's a multi-step plan, rollout plan for LiveLike with its AI strategy.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And obviously, talking about Genie, this is a product by the time this podcast launches, will have gone live in the market. It's gone through a very successful beta testing phase. Miheer, could you, just to help add a little bit of color to this and the value that Genie can unlock, could you just walk us through a really practical example of how Genie would be used by a league, by a team, by a federation, and what kind of impact they would expect to see in terms of time saved, efficiencies gained, or otherwise?
Absolutely. I mean, look, let's take the most basic example. Okay, we can extrapolate that into a larger, sophisticated use case on a user journey. But in the most basic version of someone using LiveLike's trivia tool or trivia or polling or prediction widgets to engage their audiences in real time, usually those trivia questions, let's break it down. It's one question with four options. There's one right answer, there's one wrong answer, and then there's two more options. Those two other options are probably the hardest thing to do from an editorial standpoint, because you have to make it believable. So you have to research properly, because the right answer is obvious. The most obvious wrong answer is easy as well. But how do you create the third and fourth choice, which doesn't seem completely outlandish? And so we've had partners in the past who we've had to help with, or they were doing this on their own, where they would spend anywhere upwards of 30 to 45 minutes every time they were launching a trivia campaign. coming up with those questions, making sure that it fits within their brand guidelines, the data is accurate, etc. With AI, with our Genie, you can do that with one prompt. You go into our CMS, you put in the prompt, you put in what kind of tone do you want? Do you want it to be funny? Do you want it to be objective? Do you want it to pick up from where we left off yesterday? And within 30 seconds, you have your content ready for you. Now, you can obviously feedback to us whether that was good or not, or whether you need to adapt it or change it. This is also going to be in multiple different languages. The 30 to 45 minutes for one language. If you're catering to multiple different audiences in different countries and different languages, that's another piece of work. So suddenly you've gone from spending 30 to 45 minutes or upwards of that to basically having everything ready for you in 30 seconds. And when you take that beyond to say, how did this do? How many people answered? Now you're starting to have compounding benefits in terms of time saved. So that's just one example, but I think it's probably the most practical one.
Absolutely. Sam, from your perspective on the commercial side, what's been the feedback, the reception of Genie and the impact it can have on your clients' businesses to date?
I think there are two type of reactions to AI. The people who don't know AI and whatever you put in front of their face that is powered by AI is amazing. And there are the ones who appreciate the direction in which we're going, right? I think it is pretty easy to impress at this stage with any type of AI technology. If you're not familiar with it and haven't done your own research on it, I think that the particularity of a good AI tool is to have something that is polished and usable across the board. One thing that I like about our Genie approach is that literally, so you're talking to a system that will be a mix of your LLM plus some data that you'll feed into it. So you're going to be able to choose exactly what comes in in Genie AI and what are your most relevant sources, right? And then afterwards, everything that comes out of it, you can decide editorially where to put it. And it can be a side tool for a commentator. It can be a side tool for your product manager editorially. It can be a side tool potentially in the long run that we put as a customer facing thing so that there's more user generated content that is powered by relevant facts that will be standardized across the board. So one of the things that is incredibly powerful is we've always been big on automations, and we've been plugging ourselves historically with data sources, with clipping tools for content. Now with Gen AI, we can plug ourselves to an independent tool that we help tailor for our partners that is going to be incredibly powerful editorially. And I don't think in the short term there won't be there will be any organization that doesn't use a tool like ours to be able to complement the knowledge and the expertise of the pundits and the commentators in sports.
Awesome. Question for either one of you. What do you see as the biggest challenges to adopting a tool like Genie? And what would be your advice to someone listening to this podcast in terms of how to overcome those challenges?
I personally don't think there's a reason for people not to use AI anymore. There are certain organizations, surprisingly, that have very strict rules about no AI being used editorially for the time being, only from one content source. I think that this is going to disappear
Yeah.
incredibly fast. Like it is not possible to consider the future without an AI tool to help editorially. And I think that there are genuinely beyond Genie AI on our site, there are tons of tools out there that are relevant to help editorially, whether it is from a clipping side of things, from a translation side of things, from an indexing side of things. Like it is impossible for people not to use such tools, and it is at a level where you have to understand AI is still relatively young, but it does help you with that original 80/20. You still have to have a human impact, so people should use AI to increase their own personal value by using AI in the right way. And the amount of content that you're going to be able to pull out by using AI in the right way and understanding that you still bring value on top of it is going to be fundamental for anybody working on editorial teams in the future.
I mean, and I would say one more thing on this. A lot of the hesitation are standard questions. There's like we could have an FAQ about what's the hesitation. There's hallucination. We don't want to give away our data. Those kind of things, right? which are legitimate questions, which even we as an organization had to deal with when we were first investing in AI on our own. I think with the right data sources in place, hallucinations can really be eliminated. When you're working with official data sources and you limit the constraint, you constrain the bounds of what GenAI is using to come up with the question, the accuracy is much better, but also even the foundational models are getting way better now in terms of hallucination. So the technology is going to keep improving, but we have taken that into account already, right? Like the way we designed our systems is so that there is like a check in place, a manual check or an intervention in place where you're not just using AI to automatically publish something without approval. It's to make your life easier, right? It's that the content is created for you. Now you decide whether it's work good or not and change it. So you might have gone from spending 45 minutes a day to spending 5 minutes a day. That's still a massive saving. Second thing is, data. We don't want to own data. We don't want to we don't try as a business. We have always made sure that we don't capture PII. That has allowed us to be compliant across GDPR and data privacy acts, etc. That's the approach we're taking to AI as well. Everything is siloed for a specific customer's data set. There is no cross contamination between organizations. And that is something that is going to be really important, especially in our industry, where there are specific practices and privacy laws in place, where every organization is extremely, and it's not, I guess they're being governed. Like if you take any European organization, they are being governed by EU law. So they have to be very careful about it. And we are designing our systems keeping that in mind. So I suppose the only way I could say to partners to get over that is actually to have a conversation, open conversation, have your concerns laid out, and make sure that the partners that they're working with, not just LiveLike, have good responses to it. But there is no reason to not adopt AI. It's just making sure that you're designing it in the right way.
I imagine, for a lot of brands, reputation is a core concern. Like as we're recording this, about 24 hours ago, I believe, is it Sheen, the clothing brand, accidentally published a AI-generated photo of a shirt of theirs being worn by the killer of the United Health CEO, Luigi, whatever. And it
Whoa, I
landed.
did not see this.
It landed on their website, and so that is obviously a PR nightmare
That's an
for.
own goal.
Well, yes, quite. And so I don't know if there's anything that we want to talk about in regards to I mean, you've touched on it already, Miheer. This isn't about just set and forget and publish without review, but I don't know if there's anything that we want to talk about in terms of, safeguarding when using AI at scale in the way that Genie is going to be able to provide.
I think that one thing that is for sure is that in the short term, there's not an AI tool that can run fully independently without some human checks for any type of organization out there. I haven't seen that technology. There are a lot of technology who have been using AI for a long time in the sports industry. There is always going to be that human element. And if you try to over automate it, this is where you're going to put your brand reputation at risk.
You have data privacy and making sure that the agents aren't so autonomous that they can do things on their own is definitely important. I mean, actually, there are some companies out there that are starting to become like more of like the air traffic controller for agents, and that's necessary, right? You can't just have agent to agent communication where there aren't clear guidelines and bounds on what each agent is allowed to do. So even in fact, if you look at the LiveLike Genie, the LiveLike Genie is not one agent. It's a network of agents. There is a triaging agent, there is a editorial agent, there is an analytics agent, and each agent has its own sets of roles and responsibilities that they cannot exceed. And there is the triaging agent's job is to make sure that there is a handoff from one agent to the other agent, depending on what task it is. And that complicated network of agents is how Genie operates. And so that level of control, security control, is paramount because with the world of AI, the good thing is obviously a lot can be done with very little effort. The bad thing is that it can get out of control very fast. And so that is something that we're mindful of, and I think all of our partners need to be mindful of as well.
As we look ahead to the future, Miheer, what is a use case of AI that genuinely excites you? So something that maybe was impossible or really hard to execute before, but now, thanks to AI, feels within reach.
I think running marketing campaigns is going to be so efficient. Personalization at scale is, if I were to summarize it, it's personalization at scale. I think driving personalization at scale without the help of AI is a near impossible task. And I'm talking about like efficiently running it and optimize in an optimized manner is extremely difficult. And so I think that's the part where doing anything recursively, iteratively, is going to be very, very helpful. AI is going to be very, very helpful in. And so that personalization that is possible based on likes, dislikes, all the data that's being captured, I think that's probably the most exciting part.
Sam, what's your message to your clients? What mindset do they need to adopt in order to stay ahead of what is a very fast moving AI driven landscape?
I think what's super important for clients is to understand what have they been doing, what has value, and where can AI help them. And I think that that's one of the shifts that people need to understand is that when you're looking at the content output that you're putting out there in the scheme of possibilities, your job has changed. It's no longer going to be about how much you can publish on one platform doing it well. It is going to be about how much you can do on multiple platforms from multiple angles, solving problems for multiple user personas, right? So you move from writing one article in one language to potentially having internationalization and to having some different data sources. Now you can plug all of this together and have a piece of content that is adapted to all your different territories. And on top of it, that doesn't have to be only strictly fact sharing, but that can be interactive and fun for people to participate with it.
Amazing. Gentlemen, this has been an enlightening conversation on how LiveLike is thinking about and approaching AI and using it to drive value for its clients. I thank you for being in the uncomfortable position on the other side of the microphone. And we very much look forward to putting you back into the hot seat in the next episode. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for listening to Future of Fandom. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and follow LiveLike on LinkedIn for more conversations with the people shaping what's next in the world of sports and media. Until next time, keep building for fans, not just users.